I stood before them all, trembling but unbroken, my arms wrapped around two small bodies that everyone else had condemned to die. The rival Alpha's eyes burned with dark hunger as he reached for the twins, and I heard my own voice, raw and primal, tear through the silence. "You'll have to kill me first." And in that moment, as Thor's hand finally found mine, as his fingers intertwined with my own for the first time, I understood that some souls are worth damning yourself for. But let me start at the beginning, before the blood moon, before the curse, before I became the mother to children that weren't mine, and the Luna to a pack that had cast me out like rotting meat. My name is Laura, and I was 23 years old when they banished me from the Silver Pine pack, not for theft, not for betrayal, but for healing. You see, I'd always been different. While other she-wolves trained in combat, or learned the traditional ways of herb gathering from the elder healers, I experimented. I studied the old texts, the forbidden ones hidden in the pack library's darkest corners. I mixed remedies that our ancestors would have called witchcraft, combinations of plants and minerals that defied the proper methods. And they worked. Gods, they worked beautifully. I cured old Marcus of the bone rot that had plagued him for 15 years. I saved little Mira from the fever that the pack healers had declared a death sentence. I even eased Luna Seraphine's monthly pains, though she never thanked me for it, just looked at me with those cold, suspicious eyes and asked what price I'd demand for my unnatural gifts. Price. As if healing should cost more than the effort it took. But fear doesn't need logic. Fear just needs a target, and I wore mine like a brand. The whispers started small, just shadows in corners, but they grew. She's not one of us. Her methods are wrong. What if she's cursed? And the worst one, the one that sealed my fate. What if she brings darkness to us all? The Alpha at the time, Thor's father, was old and weak. He let the pack elders make decisions, and the elders listened to Seraphine. She was already Luna then, already Thor's promised mate, already poison wrapped in silk. They gave me one day to pack my things, one day to say goodbye to a life I'd spent 2 decades building. And then they escorted me to the border, to the wild lands beyond our territory, and told me that if I ever returned, they'd consider it an act of war against the pack. I was alone, truly, devastatingly alone. I built a small cabin 3 miles into the neutral forest, right on the edge of Silver Pine's scent markers. Close enough that I could smell home on the wind, far enough that they could pretend I didn't exist. And for 5 years, that's exactly what I did. I existed. I survived. I healed the occasional rogue who stumbled upon my door, took payment in meat or furs or sometimes just gratitude. I learned to be comfortable with silence, with the sound of my own heartbeat as my only companion. I told myself I didn't miss them. I told myself I was better off alone. I told myself these lies until the night of the blood moon, when everything changed. It was the coldest winter in living memory, the kind of cold that steals your breath before you can even scream, that turns your tears to ice on your cheeks. I'd been preparing for weeks, stockpiling firewood, preserving meat, reinforcing my cabin's walls against the brutal winds that howled like dying wolves through the trees. The blood moon rose on the winter solstice. I watched it climb the sky, that terrible crimson orb, and felt something ancient and wrong settle over the forest. Every animal went silent. Every bird stopped singing. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. I should have stayed inside. I should have barred my door and waited for morning. But I heard them, crying. 2 distinct voices, weak and growing weaker, coming from somewhere in the storm beyond my walls. I grabbed my cloak, my medical bag, and a lantern, and I plunged into the blizzard without a second thought. Because that's who I am, who I've always been, even when it costs me everything. I can't hear suffering and do nothing. The snow was knee-deep and rising. The wind tore at my clothes, tried to rip the lantern from my frozen fingers. I followed those cries like a lifeline, stumbling through drifts, my lips moving in prayers to gods I wasn't sure were listening. And then I found them. 2 wolf pups, no more than a few days old, lying in the snow beneath a barren oak tree. Their fur was pure white, almost luminescent against the darkness, and their eyes, when they opened them to look at me, were the strangest color I'd ever seen. One had eyes like liquid gold. The others were silver as starlight. They were freezing, dying. Someone had left them here to perish. I didn't think. I scooped them into my cloak, pressed them against my chest, and ran back to my cabin as fast as my numb legs could carry me. The storm fought me every step, as if the universe itself wanted these pups dead, but I was stronger than weather. I was stronger than fate. I burst through my door, slammed it shut against the wind, and went immediately to the fireplace. I wrapped the pups in blankets, warmed milk with honey, and spent the next hour carefully feeding them drop by drop while they whimpered and shivered in my lap. They were so small, so helpless, and absolutely heartbreakingly beautiful. It wasn't until they'd finally fallen asleep, curled together in a basket by the fire, that I noticed the mark. A small, crescent-shaped birthmark on each of their foreheads, perfectly identical, glowing faintly red in the firelight. The mark of the blood moon. My blood ran cold. I knew the stories. Every wolf knew the stories. Children born under a blood moon were cursed, destined to bring calamity to their pack. They were killed at birth, a mercy for everyone involved. It was tradition. It was law. And someone, somewhere, had tried to follow that law tonight. But they'd failed. Because I'd found these pups, and now they were mine, and I'd be damned twice over before I let anyone hurt them. I named them Aurora and Lucian, Dawn and Light. Because after so many years of darkness, they felt like hope. They grew quickly, unnaturally so. Within a week, they were twice the size they should have been, their eyes bright and alert, their personalities already emerging. Aurora was curious, always trying to explore beyond her basket, tumbling over her own paws in her eagerness. Lucian was quieter, more observant, but fiercely protective of his sister. I loved them. Gods help me. I loved them more than I'd ever loved anything. But I wasn't naive. I knew their presence in the forest wouldn't stay secret forever. The Silverpine pack patrolled these borders, and eventually, someone would catch their scent, see the smoke from my chimney, investigate. I just hoped I'd have more than 2 weeks. The knock came on a gray morning, hard and authoritative, rattling my door in its frame. I knew that knock. It was the knock of wolves who expected obedience, who'd never learned the word please. I scooped up the twins, now the size of small dogs, and held them close. Aurora whimpered. Lucian growled, a tiny, ineffective sound that broke my heart with its bravery. "Open this door, Laura." A woman's voice, cold as the snow outside. Luna Seraphine. "We know you're harboring the cursed ones." I closed my eyes, took a breath, and made my choice. I opened the door. Seraphine stood there in all her terrible beauty, wrapped in white furs, her pale hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from ice. Behind her stood 6-pack warriors, hands on their weapons, eyes hard. And behind them, silent as death, stood Alpha Thor. I hadn't seen him in 5 years. He'd been 20 when I was banished, already carrying the weight of future leadership on his shoulders, already molded by duty and tradition into something cold and untouchable. Now he was 25, and the years had carved him into something harder, stronger. His dark hair was longer, pulled back from a face all sharp angles and shadows, his eyes storm gray and penetrating, fixed on me with an intensity that made my breath catch. He'd become Alpha 3 years ago, when his father died. I'd heard the news from a passing rogue. I'd even cried, though I wasn't sure if it was for the old Alpha or for the boy I'd once known, now buried under the weight of a crown. "Laura," Seraphine's voice cut through my thoughts. "Give us the abominations, and we'll leave you in peace." I tightened my grip on the twins. "No." Her eyes narrowed. "They're cursed. Born under the blood moon. Their very existence threatens the entire pack." "They're babies," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Innocent babies who've done nothing wrong." "Their wrongness is in their blood," Seraphine snapped. "The prophecy is clear. Children of the blood moon will bring ruin to any pack that shelters them. Alpha Thor made the merciful choice to end their suffering quickly, but you, in your arrogance, interfered." My eyes flew to Thor. "You ordered them killed?" He didn't flinch, didn't look away. His voice, when he spoke, was deep, rough, like gravel and smoke. "I did what was necessary to protect my pack." "They're your children," I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. The white fur, the unusual eyes, the fact that Seraphine was here, claiming authority over them. "Your children, and you left them in the snow to die." Something flickered in his expression, so fast I almost missed it. Pain, maybe, or regret. But it was gone in an instant, buried under layers of alpha authority. "They were never meant to live," he said flatly. "The blood moon curse is not a myth, Laura. It's history. Every pack that's tried to defy it has fallen. I won't let Silverpine be next." "So you'll murder your own children instead?" My voice rose, anger burning through my fear. "What kind of alpha does that make you?" "The kind who puts his pack above his personal desires," Seraphine interjected smoothly, stepping closer. "Something you never understood, Laura. You always put your own feelings, your own methods, above the good of the community. That's why you were banished. That's why you'll always be alone." Her words stung because they were designed to. But I'd had 5 years to build armor against the pack's rejection, and I didn't break. "If being part of your community means abandoning babies in the snow," I said quietly, "then I'm proud to be alone." Aurora chose that moment to poke her small head out of my cloak, her golden eyes wide and curious as she looked at the assembled wolves. Lucian growled again, trying to protect her even as he trembled against my chest. I saw several of the warriors step back, hands moving to weapons, as if 2 tiny pups could be a threat to grown wolves. But Thor stepped forward. He moved slowly, carefully, his eyes locked on the twins. And for the first time since he'd arrived, I saw his mask crack. Just slightly. Just enough. He stared at his children, really looked at them, and I watched something break in his eyes. "They've grown," he murmured, so soft I almost didn't hear it. "They've thrived," I corrected, "because I've loved them." "Because they're not cursed, Thor. They're just different. Just like I was different. Just like anyone who doesn't fit into your perfect traditional mold." Seraphine moved between us, breaking the moment. "Enough of this. Alpha, give the order. We'll take the creatures and do what must be done. The pack's safety depends on it." Thor's jaw tightened. He looked at Seraphine, then at me, then at the twins in my arms. I saw the war in his eyes, duty against something else, something he didn't want to name. "Please," I whispered, and I hated the weakness in my voice, hated having to beg. But these were children, and pride was a luxury I couldn't afford. "Please, Thor. Just give me a chance to prove they're not what you think. 1 month. Let me keep them for 1 month, and if anything goes wrong, I'll bring them to you myself." "Absolutely not," Seraphine said immediately. "Alpha, you can't seriously be considering—" "Silence." The word cracked like a whip, and Seraphine actually flinched. Thor's alpha power rolled out, thick and heavy. making even me want to bow my head in submission. He studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, finally, he spoke. 1 week, he said. You have 1 week to prove they're harmless. If nothing happens, I'll reconsider. But if there's even a hint of the curse manifesting, even the smallest sign of danger, I'm taking them back. And this time, Laura, I'll make sure they don't suffer. Do you understand? It wasn't enough time. It wasn't nearly enough time. But it was better than nothing. I understand, I said. He nodded once, then turned to leave. The warriors followed, Seraphine throwing me a look of pure hatred before she swept away in a cloud of white fur and barely contained rage. I stood in my doorway, holding the twins, watching them disappear into the forest. And I realized my hands were shaking so badly I could barely keep my grip. Aurora licked my chin, her small tongue warm against my cold skin. Lucian pressed his nose against my neck, a gesture of comfort. I won't let them take you, I whispered to them, carrying them back inside and barring the door. I swear on my life, I won't let anyone hurt you. They believed me. I saw it in their eyes, that absolute perfect trust that only children can give. I just hoped I could live up to it. The next 7 days were the longest of my life. I barely slept. I kept the twins inside, away from windows, muffling their small howls and whimpers when they wanted to play. I reinforced my wards, the protective charms I'd learned from the old texts, symbols carved into door frames and windowsills that were probably useless, but made me feel like I was doing something. The pack watched me. I saw them sometimes, shadows between the trees, warriors on patrol making sure I kept my end of the bargain. Once, I caught a glimpse of Thor himself, standing at the edge of the clearing, his eyes fixed on my cabin with an expression I couldn't read. He never came closer, never spoke, just watched and left. Aurora and Lucian continued to grow at an alarming rate. By day 3, they were the size of adolescent wolves. By day 5, they'd started showing signs of heightened intelligence, responding to commands, even attempting to communicate with small yips and gestures that felt almost human. It should have frightened me. Maybe it did, a little, but mostly I was fascinated. These weren't cursed children. They were extraordinary ones. On the 6th night, Seraphine came alone. I heard her approach, her footsteps deliberate in the snow. I opened the door before she could knock, the twins safely hidden in the back room. She stood there in the moonlight, beautiful and terrible, her eyes glittering with malice. Tomorrow is the 7th day, she said without preamble. Tomorrow this farce ends. Nothing has happened, I replied calmly. The twins are healthy, happy, and completely harmless. They're abominations. She spat the word like poison. And you're worse. Do you know what you've done, Laura? You've bewitched our alpha. He's been distracted, unfocused ever since he saw you again. You and those creatures, you're corrupting him, pulling him away from his duty. I almost laughed. I've barely spoken to him. You don't have to speak. Your very existence is a challenge to everything our pack stands for. Our traditions, our laws, our way of life. You represent chaos, change, everything we've spent generations protecting ourselves against. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. I will not let you destroy what I've built. I've spent years shaping Thor into the perfect alpha, teaching him to value the pack above all else, to understand that sentiment is weakness. And now you appear with your bleeding heart and your cursed pups, and I can see him wavering. I can see him questioning. Maybe he should question, I said quietly. Maybe blind obedience to tradition isn't always right. Her hand moved so fast I didn't see it coming. The slap cracked across my face, snapping my head to the side, filling my mouth with the copper taste of blood. You will give up those pups tomorrow, she said, her voice deadly calm. Or I will make sure the pack knows exactly what you are. A witch. A seductress. A threat to everything we hold dear. And then, Laura, not even Alpha Thor's mercy will be enough to save you." She turned and left, disappearing into the darkness like a ghost. I touched my burning cheek, tasted blood, and felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. She was right about one thing. Tomorrow, everything would change. I just had to make sure it changed in the right direction. The 7th day dawned clear and cold, the sky a perfect brittle blue. I dressed carefully, braided my hair, and spent an hour preparing the twins, brushing their white fur until it gleamed, checking them over for any signs of illness or aggression, or anything that could be twisted into evidence of a curse. They were perfect, beautiful, intelligent, affectionate. Any wolf should have been proud to call them pack. But I knew the pack wasn't looking for proof of their innocence. They were looking for an excuse to end them. The delegation arrived at noon. Thor, Seraphine, the pack elders, and what looked like half the Silverpine pack, all crowding into the clearing in front of my cabin. They'd come to witness judgment. I walked out with the twins at my sides, Aurora on my left, Lucian on my right. They were massive now, nearly full grown in just 1 week, their unusual eyes bright and alert. A murmur ran through the crowd. Fear, disgust, wonder, all mixed together in a toxic brew. Thor stood at the front, his face carved from stone. Seraphine was beside him, her expression triumphant. She knew she'd won. She knew the crowd's reaction was exactly what she needed. 7 days have passed, Thor announced, his voice carrying across the clearing. We agreed to observe the cursed pups, to determine if they posed a threat. Elder Thane stepped forward. An old wolf, gray-bearded and stooped, moved to the front. He was the pack's spiritual advisor, the keeper of old knowledge and older fears. I have observed the creatures from a distance, Thane intoned, his voice reedy with age. And what I have seen troubles me greatly. They grow at an unnatural rate. They possess intelligence beyond normal wolf pups. These are not mere animals, but something other, something wrong. They're just faster learners, I protested. More intelligent doesn't mean cursed. The blood moon mark, Seraphine cut in, her voice ringing with false concern. Show the pack the mark, Laura. Let them see the proof of the curse. I hesitated, but there was no point in hiding it. I gently pushed aside the fur on Aurora's forehead, revealing the crescent-shaped mark. Then did the same for Lucian. The crowd gasped. Someone shouted, "Cursed!" Others took up the cry. "Superstition!" I said desperately, raising my voice over the noise. "It's just a birthmark, nothing more." They haven't hurt anyone. They haven't caused any disasters. They're just children who happened to be born at the wrong time. The curse doesn't manifest immediately, Thane said gravely, but it will. History teaches us this. Blood moon children bring death and destruction. It's only a matter of time. Then let me prove you wrong, I pleaded, looking directly at Thor. Give me more time. Let me raise them, watch them grow. If they show any sign of being dangerous, No. The word fell like a hammer, final and absolute. Thor's eyes met mine, and I saw no mercy there. Only duty. I've been patient, he continued. I gave you your week. But Elder Thane is right. The risk is too great. As Alpha, my responsibility is to protect the pack, not to indulge in experiments with forces we don't understand. They're not forces, I cried, my voice breaking. They're your children. They were my children, he said flatly. But the moment they were marked by the blood moon, they became something else. A threat that must be neutralized. Seraphine smiled, cold and victorious. Take them, she commanded the warriors. 4 large males moved forward, weapons drawn, their eyes fixed on the twins with predatory focus. And something in me, something that had been building for 7 days, for 5 years, for my entire life of being told I was wrong, different, unworthy, that something finally broke free. No. I stepped in front of Aurora and Lucian, spreading my arms wide, my body a shield between them and the warriors. My voice, when I spoke again, didn't shake. It rang out clear and strong, fueled by a rage so pure it burned away all my fear. You want them? You'll have to go through me. The warriors stopped, looking uncertainly at their alpha. The crowd murmured, shocked. Even Seraphine looked taken aback. But Thor? Thor just stared at me with those storm-gray eyes, and I couldn't read his expression at all. Laura, he said quietly, stand aside. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Harder? I laughed, a bitter, broken sound. You're going to murder 2 innocent children because of an old wives' tale, and you're worried about it being hard? What about them, Thor? What about how hard it will be for them when your warriors drag them away from the only mother they've ever known? When they die afraid and alone, wondering why the world hates them? I saw him flinch. Actually flinch, his composure cracking for just a second. This isn't about hate, he said. It's about survival. It's about fear, I countered. Fear of change. Fear of anything that doesn't fit your narrow definition of normal. That's what this has always been about. That's why you banished me. Why you'll kill these pups. Why your pack will never be more than what it is now. A group of wolves too terrified to evolve. Enough, Seraphine snapped. Alpha, she's clearly unstable, delusional. Order the warriors to remove her by force if necessary. Thor's hand rose, and I thought that was it, that he'd give the order and this would all be over. But instead he said, everyone leave. Now, all of you. The pack stirred, confused. Seraphine's eyes widened. Alpha, you can't. I said leave. His power exploded outward, a wave of pure alpha command that sent wolves stumbling backward, heads bowing in automatic submission. This is between Laura and me. Go, all of you. They went. They had no choice. Even Seraphine, though she looked like she wanted to argue, eventually turned and stalked away, her fury a palpable thing in the air. Within minutes the clearing was empty, except for Thor, me, and the twins. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Aurora and Lucian pressed against my legs, sensing the tension, their small growls protective. Thor took a step toward me, then another, until he was close enough that I could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight of sleepless nights, the burden of choices he didn't want to make. Why? He asked, and his voice was raw, stripped of all the alpha authority. Just a man, asking a question. Why are you so willing to die for them? Because no one else will live for them, I said simply. Because I know what it's like to be cast out for being different. Because they deserve a chance, Thor. Everyone deserves a chance. He looked down at the twins, really looked at them, and I saw his throat work as he swallowed hard. They have my eyes, he murmured. Aurora has her mother's eyes, but Lucian, he has mine. He has your courage, too, I said softly. He tries to protect Aurora, even when he's scared. Just like you try to protect your pack, even when it costs you your soul. His gaze snapped back to me, sharp and wounded. You don't know what it costs me, don't I? I stepped closer, closing the distance between us, my heart hammering, but my voice steady. I see it, Thor. I see what this is doing to you. The way you can't sleep. The way your hands shake when you think no one's watching. You don't want to do this, but you think you have to, because that's what you were taught. That's what they all expect of you. I'm Alpha, he said, but it sounded like a plea. The pack's survival is my responsibility. And what if killing these children is what destroys the pack? I challenged. What if the curse isn't in them, but in you? In your inability to see past tradition to what's right? He was close now, so close I could feel the heat radiating from him, could smell pine and smoke and something wild. His eyes searched mine, desperate for answers I wasn't sure I had. "I don't know what's right anymore," he confessed, the words torn from somewhere deep. "I thought I did. I thought I had to be strong, had to make the hard choices, had to sacrifice everything for the pack. But then I saw you, holding them, protecting them, and I—" He stopped, his jaw clenching. "You what?" I whispered. "I remembered," he said hoarsely. "I remembered what it felt like to care about something more than duty. What it felt like to question whether the old ways are always the right ways. You did that. You and your defiance and your impossible courage. You made me remember the man I was before I became Alpha. The man who would have protected those pups, not condemned them." My breath caught. "Then protect them now. It's not too late. Seraphine will never allow it. The elders won't allow it. The entire pack expects—" "I don't care what they expect," I said fiercely. "I care about what you choose. Not as an alpha, as a father, as a wolf with a heart that I know is still in there somewhere." He raised his hand, and I thought he might touch my face, might close that last bit of distance between us. But he stopped, his fingers hovering in the air, trembling. "If I choose you," he said quietly, "if I choose them. The pack could tear itself apart. Civil war, everything I've worked for, destroyed. Or, I countered, you could show them a new way. A better way. Lead them toward compassion instead of fear. Isn't that what a true alpha does?" He closed his eyes, and I watched him war with himself, duty against desire, tradition against truth. And then, before he could answer, before he could make his choice, the forest exploded with howls. Hostile, angry, coming from all directions. Thor's eyes snapped open, his entire body going rigid. "No!" he breathed. "No, they can't be here yet." "Who?" I demanded, fear flooding my veins. "The Bloodcrest pack," he said grimly, already shifting into his protective alpha stance. "Rival pack, led by Alpha Corvus. He's been looking for an excuse to move against Silverpine for years, and somehow he's learned about the twins." My blood ran cold. "How? Does it matter?" He turned to me, his expression urgent. "Get the twins inside. Bar the door. Don't come out no matter what you hear. Thor—" "Trust me," he said, and there was something in his voice, something I'd never heard before. "Please, Laura. For once, trust me." I grabbed Aurora and Lucian, herding them toward the cabin. They resisted, sensing danger, wanting to fight. But I forced them inside, shut the door, threw the bolt. Through the window I watched Thor shift into his wolf form, massive and dark, his alpha power radiating like a storm. The Silverpine wolves emerged from the trees, responding to his call, forming a defensive line. And then the Bloodcrest pack arrived. They poured into the clearing like a living shadow, dozens of wolves, all bigger than they should be, all radiating a wrongness that made my skin crawl. And at their head was Alpha Corvus. Even in wolf form, he was terrifying. Massive, scarred, his eyes a sickly yellow that glowed with hunger and madness. He fixed those eyes on my cabin, and he smiled with too many teeth. Behind me, Aurora and Lucian whimpered, pressing against my legs. They knew. Somehow they knew this wolf wanted them dead. Or worse. "Alpha Thor," Corvus's voice rang out, guttural even in his shifted form. "I've come for the Blood Moon twins. Hand them over and we'll leave your territory peacefully." "You're not welcome here, Corvus," Thor snarled, his hackles raised. "Leave now, and I'll forget this trespass." Corvus laughed, a sound like grinding bones. "I don't think you understand. Those pups aren't cursed. They're blessed. Born under a blood moon, marked by ancient power. Their blood can be used in a ritual that will grant me strength beyond imagining. I will become unstoppable, and the Bloodcrest Pack will rule these territories. Horror crashed over me. This was worse than execution. This was sacrifice. Dark magic. Using the twins as components in some twisted spell. Never, Thor growled. You'll never touch them. Then I'll go through you, Corvus said simply, and your entire pack. It makes no difference to me. The Bloodcrest wolves moved forward, and the Silverpine wolves braced for impact. Battle was coming, blood was coming, and the twins were the prize. I looked at Aurora and Lucian, at their frightened eyes and trembling bodies. They'd grown so much in 7 days, but they were still just children. Still innocent, still trusting me to keep them safe. And in that moment I made my decision. I opened the door. Laura, no! Thor's voice was anguished, but I ignored it. I walked out into the clearing, my head high, the twins at my sides. Every eye turned to me, wolf and enemy alike. You want them? I called out, my voice carrying across the sudden silence. You want the Blood Moon twins? Corvus's eyes lit up with triumph. Give them to me, girl, and I'll let you live. No, I said calmly, because they're not yours to take. They're not anyone's to take. They're children. My children. And I will die before I let you or anyone else hurt them. I felt the twins' shock, their sudden, overwhelming surge of emotion. They understood my words. They knew what I was claiming. And something changed. Something in the air, in the ground beneath our feet, in the fabric of reality itself. The blood moon mark on their foreheads began to glow. Bright red, pulsing with power. Gasps echoed through both packs. Corvus actually stepped back, his greed warring with a flash of uncertainty. The curse, someone whispered. It's manifesting. But it wasn't a curse. I could feel it now, pouring off the twins in waves. It was pure, protective magic, ancient and primal. The power of a blood moon wasn't dark. It was raw potential, neither good nor evil. It simply was. And right now, it was responding to love. Aurora and Lucian moved in front of me, their small bodies vibrating with power. They stood between me and Corvus, their eyes blazing gold and silver, their growls echoing with something far older than their young years. Mine, Aurora's voice whispered in my mind, clear as a bell. The first word she'd ever spoken. Our mother. Ours. Protect, Lucian added, his voice deeper, fierce. Protect, mother. Protect family. And then they shifted. Not into adults, not into monsters, but into something in between. Their forms grew, stretched, becoming sleek and powerful while retaining their youthful grace. The blood moon marks blazed like stars, and when they opened their mouths, their howls shook the very trees. It wasn't a sound of aggression. It was a declaration. A bond made manifest. They had claimed me as their mother, and in doing so, they'd unlocked what the blood moon had truly given them. Not a curse, but the power to protect those they loved. Corvus snarled, his greed overcoming his caution. It doesn't matter what form they take. I'll have their blood regardless. Kill the woman. Take the pups alive. The Bloodcrest wolves surged forward, and Thor, without hesitation, met them head on. He was magnificent, brutal, a whirlwind of fur and fangs, tearing through enemies with savage precision. The Silverpine pack rallied behind him, fighting with everything they had. But they were outnumbered. For every Bloodcrest wolf that fell, 2 more took their place. The clearing became chaos, blood spattering the snow, the sounds of battle deafening. Aurora and Lucian held their ground in front of me, their power radiating outward in waves that made the Bloodcrest wolves hesitate, stumble, as if walking through thick water. But they weren't fighters. Not yet. They were children with power they didn't know how to control. A massive Bloodcrest warrior broke through the line, charging directly at us. Lucian lunged to intercept, but he was too small, too inexperienced. The warrior batted him aside like a toy, sending him tumbling across the snow. "Lucian!" I screamed, running to him. The warrior turned his attention to Aurora, jaws opening wide, and then Thor was there, slamming into the warrior with enough force to crack ribs. They rolled, a tangle of fur and violence, and when they separated, the warrior didn't get back up. Thor stood over Aurora, his sides heaving, blood dripping from multiple wounds. He looked at me, at Lucian struggling to his feet, at Aurora trembling beneath him, and I saw his choice written in his eyes. He'd chosen us. More Bloodcrest wolves converged on our position. Too many. Even with Thor's strength, even with the twins' power, there were simply too many. This was it. The end. We'd fought, but we'd failed. I gathered the twins close, preparing for the final assault. My only comfort that we'd die together, as a family. But then, impossibly, the Silverpine pack parted, and Seraphine walked through. She was in her human form, dressed in ceremonial robes, her hands raised. Behind her came Elder Thane and the other elders, all chanting in the old language, their voices rising in harmony. Magic flooded the clearing. Real magic. Pack magic. The kind that came from unity and shared purpose. It washed over the Bloodcrest wolves like a tidal wave, driving them back, making them howl in pain and confusion. Seraphine's eyes found mine across the chaos, and for the first time since I'd known her, I saw something other than hatred there. Respect. "I may not like you, Laura," she called out, her voice cutting through the noise. "I may not understand you. But no pack threatens Silverpine. No outsider comes to our territory and demands our children, cursed or not. If Alpha Thor has chosen to protect these pups, then we protect them. That is pack law." She turned to face Corvus, her power rising to match the elders. "Leave now, Alpha Corvus, or face the full might of Silverpine United." Corvus's eyes burned with rage, but he wasn't stupid. A united pack, fueled by protective magic, was more than even his numbers could overcome. He snarled, a promise of vengeance, but he signaled his retreat. The Bloodcrest pack melted back into the forest, leaving their dead behind, their howls of frustration echoing long after they'd vanished. Silence fell over the clearing, broken only by the sound of labored breathing, the soft whimpers of the wounded. Thor shifted back to his human form, magnificent and terrible, covered in blood and standing tall despite his injuries. He looked at Seraphine, at the elders, at his pack. "They came for the twins," he said, his voice carrying to every wolf present. "Not just today. They'll come again. As long as Aurora and Lucian exist, they'll be hunted, used, destroyed by those who see them as tools rather than children." He moved to where I knelt with the twins, both of them now shifted back to their smaller forms, exhausted from the power they'd expended. He dropped to one knee beside us, his hand reaching out to gently touch Aurora's head, then Lucian's. "I thought tradition would protect us," he continued, his voice thick with emotion. "I thought following the old ways, making the hard choices, sacrificing for the greater good. I thought that's what made a good alpha. But I was wrong." He looked up at his pack, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "These pups, my children, they're not cursed. The blood moon didn't mark them for destruction. It marked them for greatness, for power used in service of love, not violence. And I nearly killed them because I was too afraid to see the truth." He turned to me, his hand finding mine, his fingers rough and warm and trembling slightly. "Laura saved them, protected them when their own father abandoned them. She stood against me, against all of you, against a rival pack, willing to die for children who weren't even hers by blood. That is what true strength looks like. That is what true love looks like. And that is what our pack needs if we're going to survive the changing world. Murmurs ran through the assembled wolves. Some uncertain, some angry. But others looked at me with something like wonder. Thor stood, pulling me up with him. The twins pressed between us. His arm wrapped around my waist, claiming me before the entire pack in a gesture that made my heart stutter. "I reject the old judgment," he declared, his alpha power rolling out like thunder. "Laura is no longer banished. The twins are no longer condemned. And if anyone has a problem with that, they can challenge me here and now." No one moved. Even Seraphine, though her jaw was tight, simply inclined her head in acknowledgement. "Furthermore," Thor continued, his eyes never leaving mine, "I claim Laura as my mate. As my Luna. As the mother of my children and the strength my rule was always missing. She has proven herself worthy 1,000 times over. Can any of you say the same?" My breath caught. Luna. He was making me Luna. Not just accepting the twins, not just allowing me back into the pack, but giving me the highest honor, the highest position. "Thor?" I whispered, overwhelmed. "Are you sure?" He smiled, a real smile, the first I'd ever seen on his face, and it transformed him from something cold and untouchable into someone heartbreakingly human. "I've never been more sure of anything," he said softly, "just for me. You saved my children. You saved me. You showed me that strength isn't about holding rigid to the past, but about having the courage to build a better future. I don't deserve you, but if you'll have me, I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you." Tears spilled down my cheeks. After 5 years of exile, of loneliness, of believing I'd never belong anywhere again. This. Acceptance. Love. Family. "Yes," I breathed. "Yes, I'll have you." He kissed me then, in front of the entire pack, a kiss that tasted of blood and snow and promise. Aurora and Lucian yipped happily, dancing around our feet, and I heard laughter from the assembled wolves. When we broke apart, Thor turned back to his pack, his hand still firmly holding mine. "Seraphine," he said, his voice formal, "you have served Silverpine with dedication and strength, but our arrangement, our engagement, was based on tradition and politics, not on true connection. I'm releasing you from that bond. You deserve a mate who can give you his whole heart, not just his duty." Seraphine's expression was unreadable, but after a moment, she nodded. "I accept," she said quietly. "And, Alpha, for what it's worth, I think you're making the right choice. Not because I approve of the healer or her methods, but because a pack needs an alpha who fights for what he believes in, not what he's told to believe in. Perhaps there's wisdom in that. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't friendship. But it was a truce, and that was more than I'd ever expected from her." Elder Thane stepped forward, his ancient eyes bright with something that might have been approval. "The Blood Moon twins," he said slowly, "have shown us something today. The prophecy spoke of ruin, but perhaps we misunderstood. Perhaps the ruin was meant for our old ways, our old fears. Perhaps these children are meant to tear down what no longer serves us and build something new in its place." He approached Aurora and Lucian, who watched him warily but didn't retreat. He placed a gnarled hand on each of their heads, murmuring a blessing in the old tongue. "May your power grow with wisdom," he intoned. "May your hearts remain pure, and may you always remember that you are Silverpine, now and forever." The twins bowed their heads, accepting the blessing, and I felt something shift in the pack's energy. Acceptance. Not full, not universal, but a beginning. Over the following weeks, things slowly changed. The twins grew. not at the alarming rate they'd shown in that first week, but steadily, healthily. Their power stabilized, and with Thane's guidance and my love, they learned to control it. Some pack members remained wary, keeping their distance, but others, especially the younger wolves, were fascinated. They'd never seen anything like Aurora and Lucian, children who could shift between forms with ease, who possessed strength and intelligence beyond their years. And slowly, cautiously, they began to see what I'd always known. The different wasn't the same as dangerous. Thor was true to his word. He made me his Luna in a ceremony under the full moon with the entire pack in attendance. I wore flowers in my hair and stood beside him with Aurora and Lucian at our feet, and when he claimed me as his mate, when our bond snapped into place, I felt complete for the first time in my life. We built a new home, larger than my small cabin, a place where our family could grow. Aurora claimed the room that faced east, so she could watch the sunrise. Lucian chose the room facing west, the sunset, and Thor and I shared the room in between, where we could hear them both, protect them both. At night, when the twins were asleep and Thor held me close, he would sometimes trace the line of my jaw and murmur, "How did I almost lose this? How did I almost lose you?" And I would kiss him and reply, "But you didn't. You chose love. You chose change. That's all that matters." Seraphine eventually left Silverpine, choosing to join a pack in the north where she could lead without the shadow of her failed engagement hanging over her. But before she went, she came to me one last time. "I still don't like you," she said bluntly. "I still think your methods are unorthodox, and your presence disrupts proper pack hierarchy." "I know," I replied calmly. She studied me for a long moment. "But you make him happy. And you saved those pups when no one else would. That takes courage I'm not sure I possess. So, for what it's worth, I hope you prove me wrong about everything." It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever get from her, and I accepted it with grace. "I hope so too," I said. She left without looking back, but I like to think she carried a small piece of changed perspective with her. The Bloodcrest pack did come again, as Thor predicted. But they found Silverpine ready, united, strong. Aurora and Lucian, now nearly full-grown, fought alongside their father and me. Their blood moon power, channeled through love and protection rather than fear and violence, was devastating to those who came with dark intentions. Corvus himself fell in that battle, taken down by the twins working in perfect synchronization, their power amplifying each other's until even an alpha couldn't stand against them. The surviving Bloodcrest wolves retreated and never returned. Word spread through the territories of the alpha who had defied tradition to save his cursed children, of the healer who had become Luna, of the twins born under a blood moon who brought not ruin, but renewal. Other packs came to see us, to witness the impossible. Some were skeptical, some were afraid, but others saw hope, saw that change was possible, that the old ways weren't the only ways, and slowly, gradually, the territories began to shift. Packs started questioning their own traditions, examining which rules served them and which simply held them back. It wasn't a revolution, not exactly. More like an evolution, a gentle turning towards something new. 2 years after that terrible, beautiful day when everything changed, I stood in the clearing outside our home, watching Aurora and Lucian spar in the late afternoon sun. They were magnificent now, full-grown and powerful, their blood moon marks gleaming proudly on their foreheads. But more than that, they were happy, loved, accepted. They had friends in the pack now. Aurora had formed a close bond with the alpha's niece, a spirited young she-wolf who matched her curiosity and adventurous spirit. Lucian had become a mentor to the younger pups, teaching them control and discipline with a patience that made my heart swell with pride. They were exactly what I'd always believed they could be. Not cursed, not dangerous, but extraordinary in the best possible way. Thor came up behind me, his arms wrapping around my waist, his chin resting on my shoulder as we watched our children together. "Do you ever regret it?" he murmured in my ear. "The exile, the struggle, all those years alone?" I leaned back into his warmth, into the solid strength of him, and smiled. "Not even for a second," I replied, "because all of it led me here. To them. To you. To this family, this pack, this life I never imagined I could have." He turned me in his arms, his storm-gray eyes soft with emotion. "I love you, Laura. My Luna. My heart. My salvation. And I love you," I whispered against his lips. "My alpha. My mate. My home." We kissed as the sun set behind us, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. And in that moment, surrounded by the pack that had once rejected me, holding the man who had once condemned his own children, watching the twins who had been left to die in the snow, I understood something profound. Curses are just blessings that haven't been understood yet. Outcasts are just leaders who haven't found their people yet. And sometimes, the greatest act of rebellion is simply to love when the world tells you to hate. The blood moon had marked Aurora and Lucian, but it had also marked the beginning of our story. Not a story of darkness and destruction, but of transformation and hope. They called them cursed, but in saving them, in choosing love over fear, we had saved ourselves. We had saved our pack. We had saved our souls. And if that's a curse, then I would choose it 1,000 times over. The years continued to pass, gentle and sweet. Aurora eventually became the pack's chief strategist, her intelligence and unique perspective revolutionizing how Silverpine approached conflicts and alliances. Lucian took up the mantle of head warrior trainer, his combination of strength and compassion creating a new generation of fighters who understood that true power came from protecting, not dominating. Thor and I had more children, 3 more pups, born under ordinary moons, without any mystical marks or prophetic weight. But we loved them no less, and Aurora and Lucian loved them fiercely, the devoted older siblings I'd always hoped they'd become. The pack thrived under Thor's leadership and my support. We became known throughout the territories as the pack that chose change, that valued innovation over tradition when tradition no longer served. We weren't perfect, we still had conflicts, still had wolves who resisted the new ways, but we worked through them together, with patience and dialogue, with the understanding that growth is always uncomfortable but necessary. And on cold winter nights, when the wind howled through the trees, I would sometimes stand at my window and look out at the forest where I'd once lived in exile, where I'd heard 2 small voices crying in a blizzard and made the choice that changed everything. I never regretted that choice, not once, not even in the hardest moments, because those 2 small voices had become 2 powerful wolves. And in saving them, they had saved me right back. That's the thing about love, about real, unconditional love. It doesn't just flow one direction. It circles back, creating bonds that can't be broken, families that can't be torn apart. They called them cursed, but they were wrong. Aurora and Lucian weren't cursed. They were blessed. We all were. And when I finally lay down for my last sleep, decades later, surrounded by my children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, Thor's hand warm in mine, I closed my eyes with a smile on my face. I had been an outcast, a banished healer, a woman deemed unworthy by her own pack. But I became a mother, a Luna, a legend. And it all started on a cold winter night when I heard crying in the snow and refused to walk away. Sometimes the greatest acts of defiance are also the greatest acts of love. Sometimes saving others is how we save ourselves. And sometimes the cursed ones are actually the blessed ones, just waiting for someone brave enough to see them for who they truly are. I saw them. I loved them. And in doing so, I found my own soul. That's my story. That's our story, and I wouldn't change a single moment of it. The end.